Hello, all. Welcome to another episode of The Void. Another week has gone by. You got another dose coming at you. Let's see, of course, we have Sephiroth Beats on the beats. Oh man, I forgot. I was supposed to answer a question about one of those beats. I have to get back to Dustin about that. Because the truth is, I don't really know. The track numbers on that particular track are on the, I'm not 100% sure if on the Bandcamp. They are part of a two vinyl or 2 LP vinyl set that he put out with Sunken City Records. And it's like literally stuff like side B track 15. But I'll try to label some of the stuff that I'm playing tonight. This one's known as side B21 in this double album set. Let me get this camera. So tonight we have a topic brought to us by Superfan Chris. He brought up the term Psyop or Psyops, and he wanted to talk about. Hold on a second. Let me get this camera thing. Trying to, make this work. Hopefully the computer does not do funky monkey stuff tonight. You know what? Because lately it's been doing that. I think last episode, I think I was able to get through the whole episode without too much problem. But oh god, I didn't just jinx myself. Knock on wood. All right. There's a possibility that a caller might be. What's up, Superfan Chris? I've got the chat stream up, so please jump on the chat stream. Let us know that you're here. We got had some Facebook participants. Oh, we got one person on Facebook. What's up? Let us know you're here and join the conversation. We haven't even really started. Just introducing the topic. And by the way, if you want to know that a new episode is on, which is every Wednesday at 9, but you want to get a notification for it, please jump on YouTube, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Hit the notification thing. I'm gonna start doing audio only feeds on like iTunes and stuff like that here in a minute. I just need to sit down and do it and mess with it. But you know, life is sometimes hectic and busy, but I will find the time at some point. But thank you all for joining. Looks like we have 2 people on live on YouTube. People have been jumping on and off on Facebook. But they're not, you know, the Facebook crowd is not like the YouTube crowd. YouTube crowd, if you're on YouTube watching it, you're in for the show. Facebook folks are sort of passers-by. Like, it's like we're in a room and they're like walking by the room and like stick their head in, like, what's going on in the room, and then they usually dip out. But the YouTube folks, you know, they're in for the sort of long haul, which is that, you know, that's what we're in for, or that's what we're here for. That's what we're in for. Yes, it is a long haul. I mean, the topic Psyops is a big thing. For those who don't know what it is, let's pull that up. That is sort of a weirdo term. And here at the Boyd, we like to educate each other, especially in this epistemological crisis that we're living in, right? What is that? That is this point in time in which we sort of don't know what's real and what's not real anymore. So let's help each other out. So Psyops, let's do definition. And then I'll show it on the computer or on the screen for you guys. So for those of you guys tuning in on YouTube or Facebook, this should help you out. For those of you that are tuning in to the audio only feeds, I will read it out for you. All right, so PSYOPs, psychological operations, are operations to convey selected information and indicators to audience to influence their emotions, motives, and objective reasoning, and ultimately the behavior of governments, organizations, groups, and individuals. So this is pretty broad and nebulous. So, you know, it covers many things. So what does that really mean, right? And that's part of what the whole funky part of PSYOPs is that it has many forms, and some of those forms are covert and hidden, so purposely hidden from you and me and everybody else, right? So typically you'd have different levels, 3 different levels. I think it's white, black, and gray. White PSYOPs being things that official documentation, like official government stuff that's published from per the government source. Black level PSYOPs, I believe that is going to be your that's the stuff where you're that's like your more indirect, the more direct kind of stuff, or whatever, you like covert stuff that you're doing. But that's different than gray. Gray is sort of like maybe you might push that through the news or through something where the source of the information is hidden, etc. So it's pretty interesting, the topic, and let's take a look at we got a couple comments on the live stream. Let's see what's going on. So oh, Mike's on. What's up, Mike? Superfan Mike. All right, so since Superfan Chris is on here and he requested, and by the way, if you want to request a subject for the show, just get in touch with me, email me, or get in touch otherwise, or put a comment on the topic that you want to discuss, and we'll talk about it. So Chris, why did you, Superfan Chris, why did you say what instigated that? I guess that might help spark where we go with this. I mean, it's a pretty big topic because this is the stuff that, I mean, you guys might probably heard of it. Most of my listeners here know about stuff like, things like torture, like, what is it? Torture methods like that include things like playing heavy metal music for 24 hours a day for like somebody who never heard heavy metal music before, or someone who's very averse to it, or you probably heard of during a wartime, or even not a non-wartime, pre-war or something. These various militaries or different organizations would, what's it called? Would like distribute pamphlets and things like that. So like instead of sending bombs, they would drop leaflets, and they would be like written in the whatever the native language of whatever land is being psyoped with this product. And it might be a lot of times it's just a cartoon picture to depict something, and it's either to stoke, popular resistance against some interest that's against the U.S. or some. I mean, if we're looking at it from a U.S. centric perspective, or like, it could be anything. It could be something that makes them feel dissuades people from taking an action, because maybe you make a really sad cartoon and it makes them not want to revolt or something like that. Okay, so Chris says, Superfan Chris, I believe the wildfire in Cali are part of Psyop. They want to push this narrative, and it gets to these people's emotions and cause pandemonium. I started thinking about it the other day. Okay, well, so when I'm presented with a situation like the potential of a psyop operation, which could be something like the wildfires. I mean, psyops could be something like, I think it's Project Nightingale. Maybe it was Nightingale. I have to look it up. That was basically installing Pentagon messages and messaging into media. And also during the Obama, I really believe it is during the Obama administration, he signed a piece of legislation into law. I can't quote it right now. Someone can look it up and help me out if you want. But there's a piece of legislation that was signed that allowed U.S. Organizations like the CIA or FBI or other governmental entities to use propaganda and use the vectors for media, etc., and use propaganda upon the American people, which was expressly prohibited previously. So now it is that prohibition was lifted to allow for, that to happen. So it's just supposedly. I mean, I don't know. I haven't actually read I don't believe I read the legislation, and if I did, it's been so long ago. Chris says also the issues in the Middle East with Syria and Turkey. Yeah, there's definitely some type of psyop going on there. And here's the thing. The thing about people don't understand, like when I say I'm an anti-Trump guy, it's not because I like Hillary or have a devotion to the Democrats. Or, I mean, I talk shit on them too, because they're crooked assholes, most of them. But he's such a buffoon that he can't handle the psyop right. So on one hand, the narrative of the official narrative that is fed to the people initially, especially in the wake of the Iraq war, is that, for instance, if we look at it for the Kurds, this is a recent example. In fact, Slavoj Zizek wrote, he's a philosopher, writer kind of guy, wrote an article specifically about the Kurds and the situation with them in Syria and Turkey, and how on one hand the justification for war in the Middle East has been placed upon the shoulders of the Kurds in order to protect the Kurds. And then recently, in order to appease the nations like Syria, well, not necessarily appease Syria, but also whatever's going on with Turkey, and maybe to appease them, I don't know, or maybe just like Trump's just really dumb or whatever. But now he has turned around and said at first he was saying we have to protect the Kurds, right? And now he's saying that it's not our business. You know what I mean? So on one hand, maybe it isn't, perhaps, but if there's a genocide happening against a bunch of farmers, which that is at least the story that was told by this. He's based in Europe, I believe, and he supposedly is pretty familiar with the situation. Supposedly, they sort of live off the land in these communal groups, and that is something that maybe some people, I don't know. But yeah, Psyops, I mean, it ranges from, so it's so many things. Even an example might be like the top. Okay, so when in Iraq during the Iraq War, when we quote unquote toppled Hussein, and we did topple Hussein, but just in the whole situation, there was a what do you call it? Sort of footage, film footage of the statue of Saddam Hussein coming down, and that supposedly was a psyop concocted by the army, one of the army psyop units. And in fact, the people that are in the area that are cheering and chanting supposedly were brought from outside and hired by the psyop group in order to create this sort of disheartening image to the Iraqi people of their nation falling, and something like that, right? So, but the thing is, various types of psyops are very hard to flesh out and know, and that leads us to our epistemological problem, which is, again, with epistemology, it's basically what can be known, or what is knowledge, what is truth. We almost don't even know. It's pretty hard to tell. And so PSYOP can also be stuff like funding, like a think tank funding research, quote unquote research, to do something or one way or another. And the results of the research may or may not be legitimate, right? So that's becomes a big question too. So Superfan Chris says he was just about to bring up Iraq. There you go. I mean, the whole media circus around Iraq when it happened was PSYOP in of itself. It was some kind of, not even a very strong, it was a very thinly veiled motivation to move towards war. And that was just something that was happening to the American people, and American people were so, including myself. I was pretty young, admittedly, back then, but including myself, I succumbed to the vectors of what basically I would refer to as the curators of perception, right? Who are these curators of perception? These are the media, even movies, the things, stuff that's, the things that you see through the vectors that you see them, even like your social media feed, even, whether or not I'm allowed to say things on this whole thing, on YouTube or Facebook, wherever platform, those things are being curated to a degree, right? So that either censorship or the algorithm pushing something one way or another is curating your perception of the world. And those curators of perception, I have to admit, I succumbed to that, and I was actually supporting the war at the time. Now I look back, I'm like, damn, that's what I get for trusting the media, the government, and being naive enough to believe that people in those realms were possibly checked and balanced by those who truly believed in the intangibles of serving the nation and being patriotic and the importance of journalism to a free nation. All that shit that supposedly the journalistic arts and whatever you want to call it is built upon. But I don't know. I mean, I think that's true to some extent. I think you're seeing that with independent media. I think you're seeing that with stuff like this show, other shows out there, different podcasts open to talk about some pretty big things that they're not going to talk about on the news. And they're not going to confront with the questions and the answers that I might present, right? Because I'm a loony guy compared to, well, at least what the mainstream folks would say is, yeah, Boyd's a loony guy. But, whatever. Hold on. Let me move this here. I can't read the comments. So, let's see. We got a bunch of comments. Superfan Chris says, do news stations use psyops to get people's attention with stories to cause hysteria? What do you think? I mean, I think you could probably think of some examples, I bet, of the news doing that kind of thing. Pardon me. Just went for a run before the show. Big mistake. But I didn't want to run. Oh, man. I didn't want to run, but I had to do it. I got to be fit enough to run in an upcoming event that they have at here in Jacksonville called, damn it, now I just blanked out. What is that thing? Chris, what happens I think it's in Mike. Mike, what's that thing called that we run in the Gate River Run? That's it. Yeah, I'm so out of shape, so I'm trying to get a jump on this. Where was I? Yeah, but man, I got this really uncomfortable chair, and my legs are killing me. But it's all right. The show must go on. I gotta get a cushion for this chair. All right, where were we? All right, so in the comments, fan Chris says psyops cause hysteria. Okay, so Chris says if so, is the news somewhat of a tool created by the dark side to control us? Okay, I'm going to come back to that because he's got a few comments here, so I want to jump in on that. Here he says there's a news clip from reporters supposed to be in Saudi Arabia. However, the studio set they were live, had all the props behind him like he was there. It was fake. It scared people, got people to support the war. Same thing with 9/11 conspiracy. Hash up a story that some guys wielding box cutters took over and crashed a plane. We need to go to war. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. I mean, here's the thing. Some people get really offended. I used to be sort of like this back in the day. Get really offended at the notion that our own government would pull a stunt or at least possibly be privy to a stunt like 9/11 and let that shit go. And it sounds offensive, but when you look back, especially now that a lot of Freedom of Information Act requests have been granted, even if it's redacted, and now that some things have become declassified, we start to realize how the lengths at which the government will go to manipulate their people via psyops. And you hear stuff like Alex Jones talk about stuff like false flags and these kinds of things. But the reason why I think that he went on as long as he did was because part of the psyop was to reveal the truth a little bit, but through a vector which discredited the truth. And if it discredited the truth, then the truth could be in plain sight without being noticed as much. You know what I mean? So with relative little obfuscation physically, they could do things under the noses of the American people by sort of discrediting the truth by allowing strange vectors to let it out and sprinkling in some idiocy along with it, right? So now you don't know, because now there might be a little piece of truth with one of these Alex Jones things that, or something that sounds like, what we're talking about might be as we talk about Psyops stuff, it sounds like, Alex Jones conspiracy shit. But it's real stuff though. And also, in addition to what Chris brought up about CNN, there is also I remember reading some articles a couple of years ago that there was a discovery made that the U.S. military was also creating these types of propaganda videos showing bombings and different things that never really happened, and leaving these sort of like video evidence at these different different places, and people would find it, and it would sort of like just spread around organically, and so it was created by U.S. military to instigate and show that there was some kind of conflict happening, to at least sort of give a little bit of a grounding for action. I think John Pilger is the one who helped uncover that. I don't remember the exact details of that, off the top of my head. All right. So, Chris, yes, great point on the military propaganda. Yeah, I mean, military's big, of course. So here's the thing. If we go back to the roots of propaganda, now people have always been trying to convince the masses since the beginning. If I be honest with you, the Bible to me is one of the first works of propaganda. But I don't want to get into that whole discussion yet. Now, the official propaganda, though, written by Edward Bernays, was back in like the early 1900s, 1920 something like that. And maybe it was, I don't remember. I kept thinking it was 1913, but I think that date's wrong. Anyway, Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, really was one of these people, and especially back then, there was a belief that, and there still is, don't get me wrong, this belief still exists, especially amongst the quote unquote elite people in power positions that can literally change the way things work in our lives. Those people. Pardon me. Anyway, yeah, those people, shit, I can't remember where I was going with that. Anyway, the motherfucker's been manipulating us, put it that way. And so, shit, what was my point? I can't remember. Damn it. All right. So anyway, let's go back to the comments. Maybe I'll remember it again. Military propaganda. Chris says, I had a thought the other day that perhaps this rabbit hole we got into created to keep us in a spiral of confusion, constantly searching for some of the truth, but the truth is right in front of us. Hope that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, so my example with Alex Jones stuff, I mean, that might be something. Again, the truth gets to be trickled out, but it's also discredited at the same time, But, I don't like stuff like shit, like the gay frog shit, or like chemtrails, I think there is manipulation going on. There are chemicals that are being dispersed. I believe there are, though. I think that they are using some of that. I think they're using the cover of the contrails as a way of doing weather manipulation. Besides that, I mean, I don't know. This just seems like such a really vague and uncertain way to deliver a payload. You know what I mean? Unless you're doing something like trying to seed clouds or something, you know what I mean? Where it's like a localized phenomenon and you're trying to get it somewhat right, you know, like you're not necessarily trying to land it. Well, I don't know. Maybe you could still calculate from way up in the air where something will land eventually, maybe. I mean, but that's like you are just. I mean, they can barely figure out the weather, so you really have to bring all of those things in conjunction with each other to predict all that. And with chaos theory and how things work in reality, I don't believe that we have figured out how to effectively apply chemtrails. But anyway, yeah, Psyops. So I think some of that I think some of the things that we're talking about, some of that may be true, some of it may not be true. A lot of it's probably manipulation and purposefully. So I would consider that Psyop because it's done purposefully. But Psyops to me, I mean, even though officially it is a tool of government, it is really, there's also the propaganda, right? Propaganda is how do you, I mean, really it's PR also is another sort of shiny way to say propaganda, you know, a new, modern, shiny way to say that word. That got a bad rap back in, you know, after World War II with the Nazis and all that shit. No one wanted to be associated with propaganda, so they called it public relations. And so then suddenly it's, you know, a little bit different. So when you think about public relations, your PR firm or people that work at your corporation that are in the PR department, they are the propagandists, basically. And if you think about it, that's, you know, that's what they're doing. They're the spin doctors. You know what I mean? So when the question, oh, here we go. We got some updates on YouTube. I mean, excuse me, Facebook. Folks out there, join the discussion. We are monitoring live chat. Looks like we got 3 folks on YouTube, and definitely got some discussion going on in the live chat stream here. Oh yeah, the news being used as a tool. I mean, the news, of course, you know, it serves the interests of the people who are able to, you know, it's that they're able to sway the interests of those that can control and curate perception. You know, so of course the news, through what they do show and what they don't show, and this created dichotomy of the quote unquote liberal media and, you know, quote unquote right wing media. This has been created to basically not only help the capitalist organizations, which media is. They're not interested in truth. They have no altruism. They don't care about you. They don't love you. They don't love the nation. They don't give a shit. They're globalist. They're globalists trying to take over our nation. That's who the media, a bunch of globalists, and they are. They're a bunch of globalists. That's where the truth is. It's true. They are. So there's no allegiance to the nation itself, and so you're for sale just like anything else. Just like Coke and Pepsi battle for you, for your lips to suck down their you know, sweet nectar. They are fighting for your eyes and your ears to open your brain, dump their shit into your brain, just like junk food. It's the same kind of thing. They're fighting for you. So MSNBC is fine having Fox on the other side, just like Pepsi's fine having Coke on the other side. They just bounce off each other. They steal people back and forth from each other. They have their fans of devout devotees of each other. Pepsi people don't drink Coke. Coke people don't drink Pepsi. People that don't give a shit, they don't give a shit. And they probably don't watch either, or they watch both and whatever, right? I don't know. Maybe that's sort of where my shit breaks down. I don't know. But that's, well, my point is, you are consumers. You are product, right? You are product. Because the more of you that watch any given broadcast network now become fodder for the media, or excuse me, for the advertisers that they will sell ad space for. So the more eyeballs that they can attract, the more ad revenue they can sell. And that's how it goes, and it goes, and it goes. So the more they can attract you with the message, and the more extreme they can become, the more money they can make. So the truth is irrelevant. So this whole shebang about left-wing media, right-wing, this and that, it's utter bullshit. And and I believe that in of itself is a very convoluted and not necessarily centrally orchestrated psyop, if that makes sense. But also the Pentagon probably gets involved to some degree with the messaging that gets in, that they are in as well, you know. Like, for instance, if there's a guy out there calling, sort of, if there was someone out there on the national news that was insinuating, even inferring that the American populace should take up arms and begin the revolution of sorts. If I were to be like that, and say something to that degree, or to that along those lines, I would be allowed, or anyone else who said those things would be allowed on any major media vector, or channel or outlet, etc. So vector being any of the, like, a grab all of any way that they convey information. Yeah, you'd be hushed out, you know what I mean? Because that's something that even though that might, even if it brought viewership to the networks, and it became all the buzz, the Pentagon and friends may not want that type of messaging out, or they may target that person and suddenly they fell ill and died, like Epstein did, or something, you know. Chris says, have you ever seen the video on YouTube where they compile dozens of news? Yes, the Sinclair Media debacle, or whatever. Yes, that is the example of what I'm talking about. So here we have, and that's not even a major media. I mean, Sinclair is a major media organization, don't get me wrong, but compared to what? CNN? Come on. Nothing compared to CNN, right? I mean, to some degree, I mean, it's local networks, and that's a pretty smart move too for some of these people that own these networks, because some of them own. Oh man, my bad. Some of them own these networks. I don't believe even as necessarily as revenue generators. I think they own the networks as their, in a way, a pet project, like my fucking podcast. Like here I am in my shop doing this shit on shoestring budget. But what if I was a multi-billionaire? Then I'll fucking buy a news network, and then I'll hire motherfuckers that are professionally trained to say shit in a way that you'll trust, and it will convey my message, and it will be believable and much more effective than I could do probably in front of a camera, you know, telling people something, whatever. I don't know. Fuck, I don't know. I'm not a newsman person. And so you see what I mean? And if you own the local channel and you can manipulate the messaging on the local channel now, and you own local channels across the whole nation, now you have the potential to reach and manipulate entire swaths of the United States who have viewership in your local area, right? So there is a psyop going on constantly from multiple angles, right? And so that's the thing that the reason why I have this show is to talk about the fact that the world is complex, and sometimes Occam's razor in a world that is truly complex, the simplest things are also somewhat complex, if that makes sense. So you have outlets like Sinclair Media who use their power, and you have CNN who uses their power, and then you have Fox News who uses the extent of their power, and you have people like Breitbart or whoever else, Turning Points USA, different people who have, or even think tanks when they hire and pay people. You have mainly their quote unquote right wing think tanks for, I believe, obvious reason, but some people don't see the obvious reason. The obvious reason to me is because there are problems happening in our society, and there are people who don't want major change to happen in our society, and they are paying other people to come up with messaging that prevents major change from happening in our society. Billionaires don't want changes to happen in our society that prevents them from either retaining their billions or continuing to increase their billions. And now some people might say, well, what's wrong with that? In a free market, if you're amazing, why shouldn't you? Okay, sure, you can argue that. However, I would contend that there is no one that can make $1 billion on their own, that they always have to use labor in some form or fashion to make those billions of dollars. And if those laborers are living in any level of poverty or struggling or anything while you're making billions, then your billions to some degree are ill-gotten, if that makes sense. You have not shared the fruits of the labor of those who would toil to create your billions. And that's why the billions are in of itself a sign of a massive issue within the system. And a lot of the issues that we do see, even the Psyops, why it is that Psyops exists, is because of flaws in the system and the fact of potential, or not potential, inevitable, inevitable and yet, what's the word I'm looking for? It's inevitable, but not immediate, right? It's not an immediate system collapse, but it's inevitable system collapse. And so how does that system collapse manifest? They want to control it so that at least in their lifetimes, their status quo power is maintained, and probably for their kids and stuff like that. But that's going to be the messaging of those who can manipulate. So it could be Sinclair type people. It could be people who are buying politicians. It could be people who are buying, ads. It could be people who, I don't know, anything. There are anyone who uses their power to push either an agenda or a message is to some degree using psyops, to some psychological operations, to manipulate or to change your point of view or mind, which isn't bad. We should always be doing that to some degree. My show is, I'm trying to convey my point of view. Now, what I'm also trying to do is challenge my point of view by presenting it to people who may challenge my point of view. And if I can't defend my point of view, then I really should reconsider it, right? And that's my challenge to myself. And I would, probably urge you all to take on a similar challenge to always, as Tim Minchin said in a great speech, that opinions are indeed like assholes. And with one big difference, that unlike assholes, your opinion should be constantly and thoroughly examined. So that's why I believe that we should have these kind of forums like this, or that's why I, make sure to spend the time And for the three very special people in the billions of people on this orb spinning through the cosmos, very special folks, and those folks listening in the archives into the future listeners. The reason why this is here and why your participation is so important is because we are trying to flush out some of these things by critically thinking about these issues, divorced from any type of loyalty towards anything specifically, because if it doesn't have a rational reason for the loyalty, you know what I mean? If that makes sense. I don't know. Like loyalty to party, nah, I don't care. Shit like that. Maybe loyalty to some degree to the nation. However, if that means we are bombing and killing people for no reason except for a few people to gain or something, then that's a problem, right? But so to not have loyalty at the expense of others, right? If that makes sense. I mean, obviously you don't want to be a treasonous person against your nation, but at the same time, you don't want to, participate in the wrongdoings of a nation. Like I've used this analogy before about the United States, and a lot of people bring up a lot of the atrocities the United States has had in its past, from the slavery beginnings and lack of women's rights and civil rights, and all the Jim Crow segregation, all the current stuff that's going on and the weird things. We have a choice to make, and in our situation's almost like that of the mafia kids, a boss's kid, who has a choice that he or she could either lead down the path of the mafia boss and take over the mafia, or dissolve themselves out of it and try to lead a new life, even though they still live in a mansion and they have all this money and stuff like that. Does that mean they need to go and squander it and give it all away or something like that? Not necessarily. But it does mean that going forward, that they're not going to go kill the bodega owner because of some beef, or because they didn't want to pay protection money, or we're not going to go do these kinds of things. We're not going to go launder money, or we're not going to go sell illicit drugs or something like that. I don't know, whatever. That they're not going to do those things, and that they're going to move on to better things and use the resources that were gathered, even though the mafia did it in a bad way. The resources that were gathered in a good way to hopefully undo to some degree the things that were done in the past, that we would now look back and say, yeah, we shouldn't have done that. That was weird. What were they thinking? I don't know. There's a reason. Let's move on. Let's not do this again. Right. And we need to start looking at it that way. But some people are so blinded by national pride and what do you call it? Nationalism, that they won't even acknowledge that their dad's the boss of the mafia. And because sometimes we do some good things here and there in the world, but it's like the mafia boss, throwing a neighborhood barbecue. Like, yeah, the mafia boss is great. He throws a neighborhood barbecue. The kids all get fed. They're playing in the fire hydrants. Everyone's laughing and singing. Got some music. They hired a band. We're all dancing in the streets. It's great. But when his goons come to shake you down once a month for the protection money, if you don't have it, you get whacked. Right. So, it's like, But we have a choice to make changes, but we have to face the reality of what's really happening. But we don't have people that want to do that. We have mafia kids who want to run the mafia, and they want to make more money and get a stronger, bigger mafia. And that's what we're facing now. So how do we get the kids who want to reform and not be mafia family anymore? How do we get them to be in power and stop fucking with everybody? You know what I mean? I don't know. I just know that, let's say, for instance, let's say in a weird fluke of, I don't even know, some fairy dust falleth down upon us. And somehow I were in some major political position. Man, I would not feel safe for 2 minutes in that position because my ideas are too crazy and stuff like that. And if people actually were like, and if I got to the political position, meaning people were digging what I was saying, there would be shots ringing through the air or something. I would have to have like an entourage of people. The people, like literally, it would be weird like that. Because the people who are in power who want to maintain the mafia will fucking put a hit on you, because they're fucking mafia. So yeah, that's the hard part, is like, if you want to fight the mafia, you can't join the mafia and like try to kill it from inside. I don't think that works that way. So you got to like basically create your other faction, or find, who knows? I don't know. I guess you could create your government and do the crackdown, but that shit never seems to work either. So I don't know. To have these discussions, I commend you for stepping out and making this happen. Oh, thanks, man. Well, I'm glad that you are enjoying it and you're jumping in and participating in the convo. And for those of you that are just chilling and listening in, that's good too. Soak it in and get other folks to join in, share it, like it, share all that stuff. We're trying to grow the audience and get a lively discussion going. Mark, what's up, superfan Mark? He says Nino Brown handing out turkeys in Harlem. There you go. Right. I'm just saying, like, sometimes we play that Nino Brown role and we do like, oh, here's some food aid. Here's some, I don't know, some shit. Here's $1 billion, and whatever. And some of these shit, like, we're handing out all this money to all this shit. It's like we're basically embezzling money and handing it to our buddies. You know what I mean? So that's what the current government's doing. They just sort of siphon off the American taxpayers' money and just dump it out to wherever the fuck they want. And what do we do about it? We're too docile and fucking scared of. We know we are not loyal to each other as Americans. We know we can't trust each other as Americans. They made it that way. I believe that is the ultimate psyop, is the alienation that has been now baked into our society to where if there is no solidarity in movement, and that's purposeful, right? I think another major psyop that's occurred that I've referenced before is the association with conservatism and armament, guns, right? And conservatism is very specific. That's very specific psyoping, right? Why? Because if you have people who want to defend the status quo, who are constantly obsessed with arms, then as soon as the status quo is threatened, you have a completely armed populace that will defend it. If you associate progressivism and change with being averse to armament, and guns and etc., and the product, or excuse me, the tools of said basically revolution, you want to associate them together, right? So that they will never actually be able to overthrow the state. You see what I mean? How do I prove this? I don't know, but it's just really, really fishy, right? Supposedly leftists are socialists. Supposedly they're communists. If you look at any of the socialist and communist works of the original socialists and communists, if you are a devout socialist or a communist, you know one of the major components of maintenance of the socialist and communist classes, or excuse me, not classes, but of order or solidarity, is the armament of the working class to protect itself from either the emergence of the bourgeoisie or to protect it from the current bourgeoisie doing something against it with their hired goons, basically mercenaries, and aka police and military, depending on what they do. If they're not really defending the nation against domestic or foreign aggressors, then really at the end of the day they're being used as mercenaries, right? But under the guise of serving the nation, which, I mean, what are you supposed to do? You're faced with a very, very tough dilemma as a serviceman, especially if you realize that stuff, which I know exists because there's a podcast called Eyes Left Podcast. There's a podcast called What a Hell of a Way to Die podcast. Both are done by current and former military members. One of the co-hosts of Eyes Left Podcast is Spencer Rapone. He's a West Point. I don't know if I can't remember if he graduated West Point. I think he did graduate. He might have been kicked out of West Point because he's a communist. They wouldn't let him. He literally is a communist. And he believes in communist principles. He believes that communism one day will be the end state of society. He may be right, may be wrong. I don't know, but that's his perspective. And fittingly enough, he joins the military, which is a pretty collectivist entity. If you think about it, we all pitch in to pool in our money collectively to fund this thing that exists from the collective for the collective and is filled with people who are doing it because they want to do it. Yeah, they're getting remuneration for it, but what's the motivation? They can make the same amount of money in the private sector. Why would they do it? Well, because they don't get paid a lot, right? So it must be some other motivation, and some of that is Psyop, right? The motivation to lay your life on the line for freedom, all of these words that don't necessarily manifest themselves in material reality. That's why people come back from those places and those actions with trauma. And I've heard testimony from folks about that. I didn't experience myself. Came real close, real close to Air Force Academy, and I joined the Air National Guard for a minute, but I didn't get to go to boot camp, so I don't really count it. Though I did go to the base, and I was there quite a bit. Local, not really base, I guess you would call it. I mean, it's installation there at the airport. And, hung out there. But anyway, digress. So PSYOP could go all the way into generalized propaganda, really. And Edward Bernays and his ilk really truly believed that there is an elite group of people in the society that should be running society, and that the majority of people who are basically the slobs and whatever are basically sheep to be led one way or another, and not only for the good of the manipulators, but because the sheep are so dumb, for the good of themselves, for the good of the sheep is why. So it's actually a righteous role that they play in the shaping and manipulation of the reality of the sheep that they are shepherding, right? So yeah, crazy shit. I mean, and that's the thing. How do you look? How do you know? How, are you going to walk around paranoid all the time? Yeah, basically. That's the world we live in now. And what world is that? What can we really amount everything to? In reality, right? And we can have a whole discussion about this, but I'll tell you, I've already thought about this a lot. I think about this a lot all the time. A lot of our problems come back down to the root core of capitalism. Specifically, the capitalist condition of wage slavery, namely that there's no alternative to that exploitation, right? either on one hand to be able to live off the land without having to be exploited first and save up to buy your way out of exploitation. But also, if you were being exploited, okay, well then give me a vector, or give the worker a vector to owning a piece of the business that they're helping to build. And then let them own it for a period of time that equates to their time in service after their service. And then once that period's over, their shares are available for another worker to earn in the future. What would that do? That would free up people to have time. They would have a steady stream of income through dividends, or they would have capital to turn back in. Now, there is a chance that the entity could fail and they end up with nothing. Thus is the risk. That is a risk, right? So it would behoove them to work as hard as they could to create a entity that will last into that period of time in which they have shares, but they've also left the organization. What does that do? That will allow you to, or a person to, have time. And the time is the thing that we, I think, don't give enough credence to. Time to be able to socialize with people. Time to be able to work on things that resonate with you, and time to possibly do things for free for people, right? So as that starts to happen, you start to see less pressure on people to compete against each other. You start to see less need for you'll see a competition. I mean, I guarantee if someone was getting paid some type of dividend income or had a big capital infusion, they would take time out for themselves. And some of them would be bored. They might go volunteer. They might start doing things like that. Or they might start their own enterprise, and then hire people that will then become owners, part owners themselves. And the cycle goes on and on. And then that's the big thing, is that if we had more time, we could investigate the Psyop. We could be involved more in government. We could be able to be in charge enough to prevent Psyop from happening in the first place. And we could shut it down more effectively. But as it is, if you have time, if you have capital, if you have money, then you have time, and you can either buy that time on like the airwaves, or you can spend that time and use it to manipulate people. Whereas right now there's such an inequality in that type of resource that only a few people can manipulate a large number of people who don't have enough means, especially in time resource, to refute what they see. And it becomes this sort of thing where you're like almost forced to take something at face value. Mark says, so Winco advertises employee owned. What does that mean? So supposedly, if it's employee owned, then that means it's either a cooperative organization, or they have some vector for employee stock option plan, something like that. Typically, if it says employee owned, then that typically, when I read that, it means cooperative to me. That means that you have a chance to be part owner in that organization, which I would, if I were able to join, if I were seeking a job, if I had a choice between a cooperative or an employee-owned operation versus a regular corporation, I, of course, would do the employee-owned, because you can then reap the benefits of what you've sown yourself, as opposed to someone who's comparing you against a market rate And the market is a captive market that has no alternative. They can't go and till the fields for themselves like we used to do. I mean, we have modern technology that could produce even more food, more better seeds. We have better technology. All of those things produce even more food in smaller acreage, enough to be able to support somebody. Some people would rather do that than go work a menial job, but that option's not available. So we have a captive population fighting for these wages, and capitalists pay inversely proportionate to your desperation. What does that mean? The more desperate you are, the less they pay, right? All right, so I'm losing my voice. Probably going to wrap this up. Well, we're hitting about an hour, so that's pretty good. But we do have a couple more comments, so let's see what the comments say. But I am probably losing my voice. Let's see what they got. All right, Chris says, what is it going to take for the citizens of California to head to the state capitol and demand answers for why the power company shut down power for wind issues? We have hurricanes in Florida, and they don't shut down the power ahead of time to avoid wind damage in the power lines. That makes absolutely no sense, and the people are taking it and not fighting. I think this is a test run on how people react to shutting down power grids. Man, oh man, I'll tell you what, man, that might be the truth. That might be the truth, because there is a rising unrest. I know that the wealthy people are afraid of that. They know Americans are armed, and that might be, I know that a descent into fascism starts with tests. Tests like detention camps are a test. Tests like the allowance of speech that is basically inflammatory against other types of people, right? Or inflammatory and reactionary in general. That's a test to see how will people react. Well, they went and elected somebody president. Okay, well, that's a fail. So now there are more tests, right? So, in a way, the election of Trump is an indicator of a descent into fascism. And it's not hyperbole, meaning I'm not exaggerating. I'm not trying to be like one of those Hillary nuts that's like, oh, Trump's Hitler. No. No, he's not Hitler. It's different. He is a manifestation of fascistic and authoritarian tendencies within certain members of society, or of our society. We're not alone either. If you read Carol Quigley's Tragedy and Hope, I think it's a history of the world in our time. In that book, he describes the German people and their capacity to seek authoritarian rulership and leadership, and because of the culture that they had created over time, and that the rise of Hitler was only after the rise of, who was it? The Kaiser, I believe, Kaiser Wilhelm or something like that, which was also some level as a fascistic type of authoritarian leader. And so it was something in their history. And so we have those tendencies here. In fact, we had large components of the United States that were supporting the Nazis during the lead up and during stages of of World War II. So, there's the truth is hidden out there, but yeah, shutting down the power grid. What would it be like if they shut down the power grid? Probably, I wrote this, I was writing these lyrics to a song I want to put together. And it's about the onset or instigation of martial law. And the beginning of it is the beginning of the song, or the first verse is, first they turn the lights off fast, got guns on blast, dogs, boots, got squads on task. Your kids look up at you as strange dudes with masks pass by. How long this gonna last? So the first thing I envision is they shut down the power grid. Next thing you know, there's people walking up and down, right? Like National Guard, etc., walking up and down your block. Of course, this would all happen at night. They're walking up and down your block. They have MRAPs, right? So in the lyrics, I say, first turn the lights off fast, got guns on blast, dog boots, got squads on task. Kids look up at you as strange dudes with masks pass by. How long this gonna last? Call Drake on his cell phone fast because the cell phone's trash. Communications for civilians is thrash. Think about how you're gonna act. House pitch black, woman crying like you're under attack. Guard teams conducting a sweep. Wait, hold on. Guard teams conducting a sweep. Guard teams conducting a sweep. You think of hiding, think of grabbing your piece. Wait, shit. I gotta look it up. I can't remember. It's a long time ago I wrote that. Anyway, so I'm basically describing what I'm thinking, right? Of what's gonna happen. Guard teams conducting a sweep. Think of hiding, maybe grabbing your piece. Back porch, maybe beat a retreat. Standing thinking you freeze. Standing thinking you freeze. Shit, I gotta go find it. Anyway, now I'm starting to wonder what I wrote. But anyway, like, think about it. Like, it's nighttime. Your kids are like, what the hell's going on? Your wife's like, or if you're, a woman or whatever, you're like looking at. I mean, I don't know how you react. You react however. I'm not a woman. But whoever's people, just imagine how you're gonna react to that. Guys are maybe trying to act tough, grab the gun. What am I gonna do? It's time. Oh shit, the boogaloo. Okay, what are you gonna do? You're gonna play hero with your blap blap. You're gonna throw stones at the MRAP. The shit from the war that they brought back, which is literally what they did. I mean, the MRAPs, the mobile, what are those called? Oh shit, I can't remember what. Someone help me out. One of you guys know what an MRAP is. Mike says, Superfan Mike says there will be mass hysteria and a rebellion if they shut down the power grid. But there wasn't, though. You see what I mean? You do the test run in Cali. You shut down the power grid. What happened? If there's not mass hysteria and a rebellion, which I'm pretty sure there wasn't, right? Chris was saying they laid down. And that's the thing. They're expecting us to lay down, and we probably will, because picture it. What are you going to do? Run out and fight against the MRAP? You're going to shoot at it with your AR-15, or you're going to shoot at it with your what? They're in an armored personnel carrier. It is supposedly impervious to IEDs and explosives. It's just, these are now police vehicles. It's Army surplus handed to police now, and they're prepared for this. They're preparing for it. So now you have National Guard teams going up and down the street, or police teams, or conjunction of police, National Guard, possibly even military, because even though military folks might say, hey, but Posse Comitatus says, no, not allowed to have military be involved as be deputized by the sheriff. No, Posse Comitatus. Except that I believe, and look it up if you don't believe me, 2012 National Defense Authorization Act under Obama repealed and suspended, well, at least suspended, Posse Comitatus, meaning the military can be deputized by the police. This is not conspiracy theory. It's real shit. They can snatch your ass, take you to a military thing, throw you in Guantanamo if they decide to, and you have to prove that you're not a threat to the nation if they decide you're a threat to the nation. That's the type of shit we're living in. So if for whatever reason, what we're talking about becomes a quote unquote threat to the nation and I get disappeared, well, now you know the fucking people did it. What are you going to do about it? You're going to fucking sit there, or are you going to come fucking avenge me or fucking break my ass out? Fucking need the A-team. You see what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. Solidarity. So number one, if I get disappeared, you know what was going on. So be on the hunt. What was it? Yeah, Patriot Act. I mean, that's what really started the ball rolling for all this shit. And now it's just more and more is happening. And will happen, and even the court of law is compromised. So many things are compromised. I think there is a rebellion that's going to start soon. I think that I think very specific conditions are going to cause it, and the reality is less about a civil war because there's not enough of a fracture point. But there's going to be if there is a civil war, it's going to be because a rebellion is started by a small faction of guerrilla activists who are taking tangible action to disrupt the system and either cause violence, mayhem, or harm up to and including death of key people, figureheads, not necessarily, but key actual people in control of the vectors of power and who are manipulating the American people, etc. So eventually they might even get it wrong. It might happen, you know, and they can't get everything right. But as these things start happening, maybe that's what these, you know, mass shooters, some of these guys think that they're doing they have a righteous, I mean, obviously they think they have a righteous rebellion in their mind that they're popping off. Eventually there's going to be a set of actions that really resonate with the people. Someone is going to set their life on the line, and there's going to be a level of solidarity and support shown for the person who did that act that will inspire further acts. And when that happens, that's going to pop off the actual move towards revolution of some sort, rebellion of some sort, not full-on revolution yet. As that becomes more of an issue, people will then take sides. And then Psyop will be done and propaganda will be done by the rebellion forces to try as hard as they can to counteract the forces of the establishment, which will be very strong because they control all the normal vectors. So until that happens, and it might be happening, but I doubt it because you can't fool all the people all the time. And so if major people, I don't even want to say who these people would be, because then someone would try to accuse me of suggesting someone do these things. But the people who would actually do these things would probably dig around enough to come up with their own conclusions anyway. But yeah, when that crazy shit starts happening, Project Mayhem starts happening, that will inspire other people to join or be opposed to it. And then that will create a fracture line. That may institute civil war, possibly, but that would be probably a revolution. So you have your revolutionaries and then your counter-revolutionaries, right? So your conservatives would be probably, I believe it would probably be more akin to well, I don't know. I don't know which one's going to pop off first. I know the conservative revolution or rebellion is in its really clumsy way trying to start off with its participants doing their crazy shit. I mean, and that's obviously not how you do it. That's just killing innocent people. I'm not saying you should necessarily kill anybody. I'm saying that's what's going to cause the movement to happen into a different phase of into a historic moment, I guess you could say. So I'm not suggesting you go do that, and definitely that's. I'm just looking at it as an observer. You know what I mean? When you see someone attacking soft targets, they have no real. They're simply trying to cause fear in the population. They have no real intention to cause major change. Otherwise, they would hit a harder target. They would target a harder target. However, the media would be instructed to not let the populace know about that destruction, right? Because that could be compromising. To know that this could effectively happen. You see what I mean? So if one of these people, of which I will not name or suggest, were to be offed, that information would likely not be allowed out. And if it were something that could, like, for instance, for all I know, that Coke dude that died, he might not have died naturally. Who knows? Maybe it was a socialist revolutionary shot him, right? I don't know. Probably not. But for all I know, right, think about it. Would the media and the establishment want to let you know that socialist revolutionaries are popping off conservative, society manipulators, right? That would probably not be information they want to share, right? Because then there are other socialists out there who might believe, well, shit, did they find him? Because I don't think they found anybody. So bam, right? So that would probably inspire people to do some crazy shit, right? So if you blame it on a heart attack, nobody did it, right? So I don't know. I'm just saying it could be, could not be. I don't know the truth. See, all these disclosures, I'm putting them out there. So don't say that I said one thing or another. I'm just saying the potential exists out there. Any of these people, any major player, any major person that is capable of manipulating other people due to their immense wealth or position, right? Those people start getting offed or compromised. I doubt that they would, if it was done by rebel forces, I doubt the knowledge of that would be out. It would be psyoped and to be blamed on something else, if that makes sense. Chris says, yeah, they would certainly hide that fact from the public. Yeah, so see, the rebellion may have already started, for all we know. You see what I mean? But the rebellion starts with the people. So the people have not, and here's the thing, the rebellion always starts at the fringe of the empire first. Here we see Chile, other global south nations. We're starting to see unrest in Africa, and these places that are basically the hubs of exploitation, feeding the central core, in metaphorical central core of empire, which is the United States and Europe. And if we focus specifically on the United States, the core of the empire is always fed enough to keep the mass populace from revolting, enough bread and circus to keep them occupied. Meanwhile, you can have all sorts of shit happening on the outskirts. You just take your army, which a lot of people are going to join the army anyway because they need a job. You take your army and you squash the rebellions and unrest that are happening as your exploitation increases to feed the privilege of the core of empire. And then eventually the contradictions within that empire cause it to collapse. And there's some other factors too that cause collapse of empire. And we're starting to see, some of the things I'm describing might seem oddly familiar in the current day. Well, probably because you're starting to see the death throes of an empire. Yay, right? Historic moment. We get to either live or die through it, right? So something neat to talk about if we get the chance to be old, whenever this whole thing goes down, right? I think it's going to be years from now. But I think that being being an American in the core of empire, I'm privileged enough to not live in the highly exploited fringe, and therefore am probably not going to be subject to someone so desperate as to actually put their life on the line to stop the gears of the machine. Um, I can't really imagine Americans being that devoted to any cause to do that. Um, Not in real life, anyway. In words, maybe, but not in action. Maybe a couple people. That's just the way. That's just our society nowadays. There's another thing. What was I going to say? Damn, there was another point I was going to make. I don't know. It's probably a repetition of another point. But here's the thing. I do know that, well, for whatever reason, my Skype's not working. So that sucks. I think someone was supposed to Skype in today. But that did not happen. What was I going to say? But I'm glad that we did get to put the show on today and have a great bunch of audience participation, and talk a little bit about some of these things. We're always trying to get more folks tuning into the Boyd. So tell your friends, send the link out, let them know Wednesday, 9 p.m. Tune in. You can support me on Patreon, the Boyd, not me, but the Boyd, the show. Any funds through Patreon will be used to improve the show itself. What was the other thing? Shit, I can't remember. But if you want to be on the show, don't forget to get in touch. You can, if you're in the Jacksonville area, you can come to the Shop Studios and be on the show as Morris did last episode. And if you have a particular topic you want to discuss, let me know as well. But I want to thank you all for joining and making another great episode. I feel like it was a great episode of the show. And I guess I'll see you guys next time on The Boyd. So let me find this thing, and I will see y'all next week.